Welcome to Beekeeping Today podcast presented by Bee Culture. Beekeeping Today podcast is your source for beekeeping news, information, and entertainment. I'm Jeff Ott.
And I'm Kim Flatham.
Hey, Jeff and Kim. Today's sponsor is Global Patties. They're a family-operated business that manufactures protein supplement patties for honeybees. It's a good time to think about honeybee nutrition. Feeding your hives protein supplement patties will ensure that they produce strong and healthy colonies by increasing brood production and overall honey flow. Now is a great time to consider what type of patty is right for your area and your honeybees. Global offers a variety of standard patties as well as custom patties to meet your needs. No matter where you are, Global is ready to serve you out of their manufacturing plants in Airdrie, Alberta, and in Butte, Montana, or from distribution depots across the continent. Visit them today at www.globalpatties.com.
You bet. We want to thank Bee Culture Magazine for continuing their presenting sponsorship of this episode. Bee Culture has been the magazine for American beekeeping since 1873. Subscribe to Bee Culture today. And while you're there, check out Bee Culture's Beekeeping Your First 3 Years, a quarterly magazine for beginning beekeepers. We also want to thank 2 Million Blossoms as sponsor of this episode. 2 Million Blossoms is a new quarterly magazine dedicated to protecting all pollinator insects, both wild and managed, before they disappear. The magazine is full of beautiful photos and informative articles. You can learn more on our Season 2, Episode 9 podcast with editor Kristen Trainer and from visiting www.2millionblossoms.com, and that is with a number 2. I almost didn't get through that, Kim. Hey, it looks like spring has finally got here to the northern latitudes.
Yeah, it's kind of here, Jeff. I don't have leaves on trees yet. The red buds are just beginning to pop. Some of the early apples are out. Packages came in last week. So I'm kind of worried about them, and I've got friends in North Carolina that are pulling swarms out of trees. So, yeah, it's spring.
Hey, well, speaking of swarms and trees, you have friends in the Pacific Northwest who had swarms. I had a swarm last weekend.
You're kidding.
Walked out there, walked out there. This hive and silly hive had swarmed, and the swarm was underneath,
hanging on the bottom board, huh?
Hanging off the bottom board.
Yeah.
So I swept them into a pan and put them in a nuke, and I checked them today, and they're just humming right along. They're just fat and happy.
So mid-April, is that typical swarm time in the Pacific Northwest?
I've not had them in the end of April, mid-April before. It seems I have to go back and check my notes, but it was in May before I've had swarms. But you know what? It's really interesting, not to put a product plug here, but let's just say I had a hive monitoring, a brood minder type product on my hive, and I got an alert saying, hey, you might have had a swarm because it noticed a sudden loss of colony weight.
Outstanding.
I thought that was pretty cool.
That
was pretty cool.
So what, did like an alarm go off on your phone or something?
I received an email. Yeah, it said...
You're kidding.
You might... Oh, it was a loss of, and they lost 4 pounds, I think. An alert triggered the alert.
And they said, and the device sent you an email that said, maybe pay attention, Jeff. You just lost 4 pounds of bees. Yeah,
go look. And I said. You know, just like anybody in the new world with instruments, I didn't trust my instruments, and I said, stupid computer. There's nothing going on out there. It's April. It's Pacific Northwest. It's been raining. I went out there, and by golly, there was a swarm hanging underneath the bottom board.
You know what you need is Jerry Bromanshank's device that talks to you. You know, instead of just giving you a weight and sending you an email, it needs a device that just talks to you and says, hey, get out here, guy.
Maybe so. I did use his Bee Guru app and afterwards, so maybe we'll find out
all right,
what the bees are talking about after the swarm. Hey, I'm looking forward to our podcast with Dr. Jeff Pettis. You know him from way back, don't you?
I do. I've known Jeff a long time, and it'll be good to talk to him again. We were at Apimondia together, and I saw him, maybe 500 yards away, and we waved, and He was busy, and I was busy, so we didn't get to chat. So it'll be good to catch up with him. I haven't talked to him in quite a while.
Well, let's get right into it. I know he has a lot to talk about. Well, Dr. Jeff Pettis, welcome to Beekeeping Today podcast.
Thank you, Jeff. Good to be here. Yep.
Yeah, and I want to thank your parents for what a wonderful name you have. I think that's we're just recognizing that.
Yep. Except my full name is Jeffrey, Jeffrey, and almost never gets spelled correctly. So it's not Jeffrey and it's not Joffrey, and so it's Jeffrey. Anyway,
I'm the R-E-Y way, so it's oh well. Well, we'll just something to throw Kim off. He won't know which.
Let's
Jeff
hold it at Jeff. I like Jeff.
To.
Well, it's KIM here, and Jeff Pettis. It's been a while since you and I have had a chance to talk. I waved at you briefly at the Apimondia conference up in Montreal this year, and that was as close as we got. You were running full speed the whole time. And it's been a while, like I said, it's been a while since we talked. So what have you been up to since you left USDA?
Well, good question, Kim. Yeah, I did. I remember seeing you in Montreal, and Montreal was quite a busy time, quite a good meeting. So I left USDA and moved on to do other things. And most people think I retired. Well, no, I didn't retire. I was active. I had a couple of PAM grants, Project Apis M grants, and I'm still working on some of those. I also have an active grant with Dave Tarpey, USDA grant with Dave Tarpey, working on queen quality. So I'm currently working on amitraz resistance as well, looking at whether we have amitraz resistance in the U.S. So still pretty active on the research front. But the Apimondia hat that I wear, I was already the president of this Bee Health Commission. So that Bee Health Commission, we cover, varroa mites, AFB, all the things that afflict bees worldwide. And I was head of that for over 4 years. And then this past year in Apimondia, I was elected president. And that's been a change in what I'm responsible for and stuff like that. So it's a new hat, but it's a welcome challenge, I think. It's serving beekeepers globally.
Well, that's good to hear. It's good. I want to go back to your research. Let's just start with there. You're working with queen quality with Dr. Tarpey. How's that going?
Not well. No.
Oh.
I jest because we've identified shipping temperatures when queens are shipped from the queen producer to the beekeeper. We've identified queen shipping as one of the issues, but there's a lot of other issues with queen health and stuff. So it's only one of the possible problems. And I kind of modeled did a prototype of not an air-conditioned shipping container, but a small shipping container that would move air and kind of guarantee the queen's safe arrival. But it'll take some more engineering to do. And I'm not sure if the industry needs it, and I'm not sure if the industry's ready for it. So there are some issues with queen shipping. And then Dave Tarpey, we've been working on drone health and some other issues with pesticides in queens. So we're just continuing that work. And while I say it's not going well, it means that queens are still a major issue for beekeepers, around the globe. And the longevity of queens I know it's not what it used to be. I mean, people say, how do you know that? Well, you used to see 2 and 3 year queens, and we don't see queens lasting much more than 6 months to a year now. So it's an uphill battle on queen health.
Well, you guys, I think you're right there, and the meetings that I attend, that's always one of the questions: what's going on with queens? So I think you're working on the right place, looking at the things that need to be looked at.
Well, one thing I'll give Dave Tarpey's lab a big plug. They have what they call a queen clinic, and I know several queen breeders around the country are using it. So if the queen breeder wants to know if his or her queens are well mated and high sperm viability, they can ship queens to Dave Tarpey's lab, and he'll analyze them for them and give them a report on those queens. And that's been helpful, giving feedback. We know that early mated queens sometimes aren't so good, sometimes in the midsummer, maybe heat stress or whatever. So he's able to give feedback and provide some information back to the queen breeder about what, the quality of those queens that they're producing. So it's an ongoing service that he's providing, and we're still working together on like I said, some of the heat stress issues and also some of the pesticide exposure issues with queens.
So if I'm going to be buying queens, it might behoove me to be talking to the queen producer that I'm working with and say, by the way, have you run your operation through Tarpey's lab to see if things are going okay?
Well, yeah, it's not. I mean, you can analyze 10 queens and get a pretty good handle on that particular time frame, and say, these queens coming out at this time of year are really high quality, and he'll give you a score. I mean, it score based on all the queens he's analyzed over time, and say, these are A+ queens or these are B+ queens or whatever. So, it's not a bad idea. And
what factors is he looking at? I mean, is he scoring on?
So you ship him the queens live. You ship him a number of queens live. He weighs the queen, which is just a kind of a gross measure of, we always think larger queens are better, and that may not always be true. He does a bunch of morphometric measurements, also just measuring wings and stuff to see what that is. Some of the key measures are he'll do sperm volume, the number of spermatozoa in the spermatheca, and then the live dead. Those two measures are really important. So a well-mated queen should have over 5 million sperm, and sometimes they'll have 8 to 10 million sperm. If they get below about 3 million, they're probably not well-mated. And the other thing is the viability should be at least 85% or better, at the time. And we're seeing some of these failing queens that have 30 and 40% viability. So their sperm viability is way down in some of these queens that have been heat stressed or whatever. The sperm volume or the number of sperm and the sperm viability. He also can do virus things like that, but the virus numbers. I mean, what do we do about viruses? What are we doing? What are we doing currently about coronavirus? Social distancing,
canceling everything under the sun is what we're doing with the coronavirus.
I know. Yeah, I'm canceling most of my trips is what I'm doing. Right? Yeah. So.
Well, a question then is he looking at queens over time, brand new queens just mated, queens a year old, queens older than that?
So we've done some of that. He did a very nice study with, I can say the name, Ray Oliveras. Ray's a number of beekeepers are really cooperative. So I'm not pointing out Ray as being exceptional, although he is, but Dave went to Ray and said, hey, can I get some of your queens from this certain batch? And then you run them in your production and look at them over time. So look at them over like 6 to 8 months. So out of this one mating group, they tested them right after they were mated. And then he put them in production colonies and shipped them to Dave across the whole season. Well, they only lost like less than 10% viability over that time period. So they actually, in the colonies, they held up really well. So he's done that. I've done and published some stuff on like beekeepers who were requeening. The variability was all over the board. And then when beekeepers rated the colony as failing versus good, the queens in the well-performing colonies had much higher sperm viability than those in the failing colonies. But not all failing colonies have poorly mated or low sperm viability queens. So, but that's already been published. So, yeah, no, Dave looked at the time series effect. But now we're getting more into drones, like making sure that drones are maturing in the spring and flight time and even pesticide exposure to drones. So are the drones, before they ever mate with the queens, are they in good shape? So we're doing some of that work, and that's ongoing.
That's going to produce a pretty interesting picture when you get some of these things done. And also, I can see where it's going to educate beekeepers on questions to ask and symptoms to look for.
So when I started the heat stress stuff about 2.5 or 3 years ago now, it's been maybe more than that. And the queen breeders were already aware of heat stress in particular, because when it gets so hot, they knew, they're shipping in these battery boxes, and sometimes the battery boxes overheat, that kind of thing. So they're doing a lot of things, adding extra water. So they were well aware of some of the problems, but we were trying to find what was the upper and lower limit for safe shipment. And we actually think we've arrived at it. It's about, and I'll have to give it to you in centigrade, and I'll let you do the conversion. I can do the approximate conversion. It's somewhere between 39 and 40 degrees C is the upper limit. For if queens are exposed to 39 to 40 degrees centigrade for more than an hour, the viability and within her, the sperm viability is going to go down. If it drops below about, I think it's 8 to 10 degrees C, so even on the low end, 8 to 10 C, which is about not much below 50 Fahrenheit, but 8 to 10 degrees centigrade, the sperm viability can be damaged by the cold. So we've got an upper limit of 39 to 40 centigrade, and we've got a lower limit of 8 to 10 degrees C. And that's only an hour's worth of exposure. So
that's really narrow.
There's a fairly narrow window when they're completely safe. We had a shipment that got cold in July, Kim. It got to 8 degrees being shipped in July in the U.S. So how did that happen?
Not in Ohio, I hope.
It had to be in the air. What we assume is it was in the airplane. It was that something about when the airplane was at 30,000 feet, they didn't quite regulate the cargo hold well enough. And so that's the only explanation, because we also put 2 thermocouples in every time to make sure we're not getting false reading. And if they track the same, it means that, it's a true reading of temperature.
Wow. 8 degrees. Wow. That's cold.
8 degrees. 8 degrees C. That's only about
Celsius.
I think it's about in the low 40s. I can't always do the direct conversion. 16 is 61. That's an easy one. That's the easy one to remember. 16 is 61.
And 0 is 32.
Yeah, and 0 is 32. Yeah.
That's about as good as I get right there.
And that's all post-mating, right? Any research into pre-mating stresses on the queen and viability?
Another good beekeeper, Zach Browning. I worked with Zach Browning, and he mated a bunch of queens in California, and we followed them and we exposed them to amitraz in different ways. And amitraz exposure, surprisingly, didn't seem to affect them. That was actually amitraz treatment to the colony. So he raised a bunch of queens in California, and we treated them in North Dakota when they got there. And that publication has actually fairly recently come out. Just we even treated them with, I'll say, some less than legal treatments, because we wanted to mimic what the beekeepers were doing. So we used
real world,
the legal strip, and we used 2 other forms: a shop towel and grease, and we used it according to common recommendations. And we didn't see an effect on the queen. So we've done that with actually they were already mated. On the pre-mating, it's mostly we've been doing work on the drone side, looking at what can we do to produce good, healthy drones and year round, because the queen breeders are still trying to breed queens all through the year. Springtime's easy, except early spring. Early spring, it's hard to get the drones mature, but mid-spring on, it's really easy. It's the summer that gets really stressful on drones as well. So
I would think the post-analysis or the analysis on the post-mating drones would be difficult. Thinking it through, you know.
Well, you mentioned amitraz, Jeff. You're doing some other work with amitraz, aren't you?
Well, I think amitraz is still being used, is it not? Yes. So Project Apis M, again, a really good outfit, funding a lot of really good practical research. They funded both Ramesh Sagili to do some work on amitraz resistance, developing an assay or looking at was there resistance in the Pacific Northwest and in Canada with Shelley Hoover in Alberta. And then I was taking a kit that I developed, a field assay that I developed, and comparing it to the Veta Pharma has a little mite wash kit that they do, and they've adapted it to run an assay. They've adapted it to put a little piece of amitraz in there and put live bees in it and tell whether or not you've got mite resistance or not to amitraz. So I tested their with input from them. I tested their kit versus the one I developed, which is just a mason jar with a screen lid. So I ran the 2 kits side by side, and they're pretty comparable. But now the real question is there resistance out there? There are mites that aren't as easily controlled, but the question is, when do you call it resistance? And that's the question we're still after. I'm not seeing high levels of mites that can't be controlled, but they're not as easily controlled as they have been in the past. So to compare, to put it a little bit into context, when we saw fluvalinate resistance come, it came in at about a year and a half, or 2 years. It didn't take long for it to really kind of spread wide. Coumaphos resistance happened even quicker than that. I mean, it just came in and you almost couldn't control the mite resistance spread really quickly across the country. For some reason, amitraz, they're partially resistant, but the resistance is not being fixed, or it's not holding. And I'm not sure why that is. It must come at a great cost to the mites or something. And so the susceptible mites that are out there outnumber them. So we're still controlling them, but there are signs of some level of resistance. So amitraz is still working at the moment.
Okay.
Are you finding a regional pockets of resistance across the country?
Well,
or is it...
so I worked in California and Tennessee and on the East Coast here, along in Maryland and along this coast. And I haven't seen anything that I would really call resistance. Ramesh in Oregon was comparing his mite populations with those in Alberta. And the mite populations in Oregon were harder to kill than the ones in Alberta. But I don't know if you call them resistant or not. And he was getting bees from California, Oregon, and Washington State. So he was getting a number of beekeepers from the West Coast moving in to do, I think, onion and carrot pollination. So he was doing a cross section of about 3 states. And that work is ongoing somewhat.
Bees in Canada coming in from, I know, New Zealand is part of it?
New Zealand and Chile.
Yeah. So that's certainly going to be a factor.
That's true. They get fresh mites. They get fresh.
Okay. Well, you're also keeping bees.
I'm keeping a few bees here. So I moved out of the Washington, D.C. area. It was a high rent district. I was glad to get out of it's very crowded. It was a good place to raise boys, a great school system and stuff. But I'm on the eastern shore of Maryland, it's Salisbury, Maryland. It's a town. We're halfway between the Chesapeake Bay and the Atlantic Ocean. So we're right in the heart of, they call it Delmarva, Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia. But it's a nice area. And my youngest son, Kevin, and I are keeping somewhere between 25 and 75 colonies. It depends on what time of year you ask me. So, yeah, it's new. And I'm trying to develop it into a small business for him. So he's really taken to beekeeping lately. None of the boys did at first, but lately Kevin's kind of taken to it. And we're running a few bees, which is nice. It's fun. It's Jeff, you mentioned your guitars are an escape. Well, the bees for me are a nice escape. You have a bad day, just go out and work bees, and it'll take your mind away from things.
Oh, definitely.
So what are you doing with the honey you're making? And are you doing any pollination?
Well, so yeah, we're doing a little bit of pollination. They grow a lot of vine crops, a lot of watermelons, etc. And a lot of beekeepers on the Eastern Shore keep bees on trailers. So it's just a trailer. And I was lucky enough to link up with Oliver Collins. He's a commercial beekeeper here who's downsizing from 3,000 to 500. And I bought a few of his trailers, and I did a little bit of pollination, blueberries and pumpkins last year. So you put 20 hives on a trailer. You never have to lift them, and you just haul the trailer to the field. And when it's done, you haul it back. So yeah, doing a little bit of pollination and mostly honey production. And we sell at local markets here. So we sell and control the whole price line. And yeah, it's a good product. Which when we get to Apimondia, we'll talk about honey fraud, because that's a major issue facing beekeepers worldwide. And Apimondia is active on that. But I mean, the best thing you can do for honey fraud are educate the consumer, then have the consumer buy more directly from the beekeeper. And I know that's not always possible, but that's the way to get rid of honey fraud, is know your beekeeper.
Isn't that the truth?
Beekeeping is harder than you thought. Frustration ignites innovation, and the Hive Butler and the Hive Butler Uncapping Tank are products designed by frustrated beekeepers. Honey harvest needs to be cleaner and easier. The Hive Butler does just that for you and more, including makes hive inspections safer for your queens, makes swarm collections easier, moves bees smoothly in public, and store your drawn comb over winter. The Hive Butler is working for you every season. Order online at thehivebutler.com or ask your favorite bee retailer to carry the Hive Butler products. The Hive Butler is working for you even when you're not. See the full line at www.thehivebutler.com.
Well, you brought up the subject, Apimondia, and I know you, for the last 4+ years, you've had some role with them, and that just changed. But what were you doing with them the last 4 years or so?
So I was the president of the Bee Health Commission, which we have about 5 scientific commissions: bee biology, bee health, bee products. We work in all different aspects of beekeeping, and I was the president of the Bee Health Commission. So I worked on varroa and AFB, all the pests and diseases that affect bees. And we, most people know, we hold a big meeting every 2 years. It moves globally around the world. And so I was in charge of the scientific program for bee health for that part. And then this past year in Montreal, I was elected president of the organization. So now I'm doing more public relations and more just across the board, trying to manage the organization and help us serve beekeepers better.
Well, Apimondia isn't really well known in this country, and it's not really well known by me. Can you just give me a matchbook cover sketch of how it's how the administration works and filters down? So, and what does it do for me?
Okay, well that's so. Let me start with a little bit of history. I won't give you the long.
That's good,
long
yeah.
But
good.
It started out of Bucharest, Romania, in the old Soviet Union and stuff, and it was a publishing house, and it was gathering information on beekeeping and publishing this thing called Apiacta, and then they started holding this global meeting, mostly European based, but it was called Apimondia. It started. The first one was in Copenhagen, Denmark. I think it was in Denmark about 100 years ago. So then every second year they'd have a big international meeting. Well, international meant it really only was European. And then the Americas and some other people started getting involved, became more international. It's mostly just bringing beekeepers and scientists together to try to talk about common problems and serve the industry. There's a huge trade show that goes along with it. And it's a chance for, like I said, for beekeepers from all over and scientists from all over to come together and talk for a week about common problems. So luckily, you're right, in North America, it's not as well known, but the Canadians have always been involved in Apimondia, and they've hosted 2 in Vancouver and then just recently in Montreal. But the American honey producers have just joined. And they joined because of our work, Apimondia's work on honey fraud. So I have to give a shout out to Norberto Garcia, who's on our board. And he is active in international honey markets and trying to understand honey fraud. And so has the honey producers. I mean, the honey producers have been after honey fraud, and adulteration for a long time. So the American honey producers saw the value in joining Apimondia. And so we have a common theme there, at least in honey fraud. So I didn't give you much about the administration. So, sorry, there's a president and a vice president, and there's an executive secretary, and he's in Rome, and he kind of runs the day-to-day operations of the thing. We have about 120 to 130 full members, which are either countries or major organizations within those countries. So you have to represent the majority of beekeepers in a country, or the majority of beekeepers in a region of a country. So you can be a full member. There's a lot of associate members, smaller clubs and things like that. And then you can,
And these are the producers.
No, they're beekeeper organizations. So we represent globally all the different beekeeping organizations, but within those are the beekeepers themselves. So we're the International Association of Beekeepers Association. So we're the head body that kind of pulls it all together. And our flagship is the meeting every 2 years. But beyond that, we host symposia in different parts of the world on specific problems. Like we just had one in the Philippines about 2 weeks ago on stingless bees. And people do manage stingless bees, little small stingless bees that produce very small amounts of honey, but it has medicinal qualities. So it's high value. So there's even that kind of beekeeping. But back to the structure. So we have a president, vice president, and executive secretary, and then we have these 5 to 6 scientific commissions, and we have 5 regional commissions. So we have one for the Americas, which is North and South America, and we have one for Europe, the East, Africa, and Australasia. So we have the regions of the world represented by a president from that region, and to bring the concerns of those people forward to Apimondia. So anyway, it's been an organization that was mostly focused on this meeting over the past so many years, and before that, it was publishing. We were Kim, and you could probably appreciate that. Being associated with bee culture. They published AP Active for a long time. That print form kind of fell out of favor, and that we don't do any printing anymore. But I'm hoping that we're going to change and get better in the information exchange realm, where we're doing more, just like you're doing here, digitally and with video streaming of some of our conference information. So that was what in my goals for the organization, I talked about 3 things. Was diversity of the beekeepers, the types of beekeepers and the types of bees that we keep. So from Apis mellifera to stingless bees, just different kinds of bees. And the diversity of types of beekeeping, very traditional beekeeping in log hives all the way up to modern, mechanized beekeeping. And then communication. And I talked about having part of our meeting streamed so that people don't have to go to the meeting, and be there in person. They can stream it from Ireland or from Africa and be involved in the meeting. And I didn't realize that, we were about to be hit by a disruption to world trade and commerce. But we just had our first Zoom meeting of our executive committee. So I just set that up, and we just use Zoom to meet across about 12 time zones. So, but for the organization, for Apimondia, and for the meeting, I'm hoping to create more digital content for beekeepers around the world to tune into. So that would be a goal. And the last part is just respect for the bees. We have to keep, the bees themselves are what we're all about, keeping good bees. Anyway, I know that was kind of a long-winded Apimondia sales pitch, but it's a challenge because beekeepers vary all over the globe, but we try to represent them all, and we try to represent their interests.
How often does the board meet?
So we meet every May. We're on a 2-year cycle. So every May, the whole executive meets in Rome. On a non-conference year, we meet in Rome. And on a conference year, we meet in the city where the meeting is going to occur. So last May, we met in Montreal, and then we came back in September, we had the meeting. So this year, this year we're going to have, this is good. This year, we're going to have a virtual meeting in May on Zoom and cut down on transportation costs and our carbon footprint and everything else. So we'll have a virtual meeting in May via Zoom. And then hopefully next May, we'll meet in Russia, in Ufa, Russia. Ufa, Russia is the site of 2021, our meeting in 2021. So we'd meet in May there, and then in the following fall, we would have the international meeting. So we have 13 or 14 executive board members, and we come together and discuss the business and set the agendas and work on the scientific programs and things like that for the meeting.
Jeff and I normally work mostly at most 3 time zones. I can't imagine trying to organize 12.
So well, guess what? You're right about North America has not been as involved in Apimondia. I'm on the one extreme of the time zones, and the other is Jody Goldsworthy in Australia, and she was tuning in at 10 o'clock, and I was tuning in at 6 a.m. So, and then we have this window of about 4 hours where I'm waking up, and she's but everyone else is in the middle somewhere. So it's we only have that one window because I don't really feel like getting up in the middle of the night, but it works. It works. And we're going to have to get used to it. So what I was going to come back to, two of the biggest issues that we're working on. One is just honey adulteration and honey fraud. I mean, that's a huge issue. I mean, that's one of our major initiatives. And
Jeff, before you go further, what's the definition of honey fraud?
It can be a lot of different things, but generally it's the addition of some type of syrup that is not honey to increase the volume and then lower the price and of the weight. So they add rice syrup or some kind of corn syrup to honey and hope it goes undetected. And if you can add it up to 15 or 20 or 30% of the honey, then you've just increased your profit, because the honey is worth, let's say, $5 a kilo, and the rice syrup is worth, 30 cents a kilo or something. So it's often it's the addition or the adulteration, the addition of other sugars that are not really honey. The other way that we're worried about is not actually letting the bees process, like you're just harvesting unripened nectar and then just the bees haven't added the enzymes to it and things like that. And so you're taking really raw nectar, extracting it and drying it down and calling it honey. And to us, the bees need to go through the process of adding the enzymes, lowering the moisture, and then it becomes honey. There's some issues in the tropics because tropical honey can have high moisture content, above 18, above 23%. So we have to be able to dry honey at some point, but we should let the bees actually mature it, and then we harvest it. And there's a lot of harvesting of immature honey and then drying that down and calling it honey. So there's several ways that honey fraud's going on.
Recently, there's been reports in popular science media that there's been some scientists who have recreated the enzymes of a bee's gut and can produce lab honey. Would that be considered, if they could produce that in a production
I would
level?
certainly hope that we would be able to detect it and call it not honey. Back to the American honey producers a little bit, because they've been active they got an embargo, World Trade Organization. They went to WTO and said China's dumping, and I have to call it by name, China's dumping honey at the U.S. market below production cost. And the World Trade Organization agreed with them that we got an embargo against Chinese honey for, I think, 3 years. Well, guess what happened to Vietnamese and some other country? Their honey production went through the roof. So that's another type of honey fraud, where you take honey from a country, it's banned because of chloramphenicol or it's banned because of some other thing, and they transship it and relabel it as, some other honey. Ukraine, there's issues with Ukraine and other, I don't want to call out all the countries, but there's a huge issue with the correct labeling of country of origin, and also in letting the bees mature the honey and having it be real, as we think of as real pure natural honey.
One of the things that has come out of this with the American honey producers and others, I'm sure, is finally the FDA has created something called a commercial item description, CID, that goes way, way, way past the definition that we have of honey in this country. The official legal definition is a syrupy substance, nectar collected by bees, stored, dried, and that's about it. What the CID does is it's actually, I'm sure you're aware of this, it's a description of honey that the government uses when they are going to purchase honey, when the federal government's going to purchase honey for their own use. And they have this for every product that they buy, a CID. Now we have one for honey, and basically what it is, it takes the definition way beyond this syrupy, sweet substance, outlining the tests that it has to pass and by what degree it has to pass them, and various different analyses that it goes through. So what the U.S. is looking for is to have this adopted so that when something comes on shore, there are testing facilities available and the honey gets tested. And part of this, of course, is that you mentioned mislabeling its source. Some of that's going to be pollen testing, I'm sure, right?
Yep. But guess what? they're getting so sophisticated. There's another thing that happens because you get antibiotic contamination and stuff because, and then you ultra filter the honey so you can get some of that out. Then they go back and add pollen of whatever appropriate plant that they want to say that the honey's from. So there's some fairly sophisticated honey fraud going on out there. So I agree that the honey producers and other groups have been really active. Apimondia, we've been working with Codex. Then Codex happens to be part of it's based at FAO in Rome, and we've got a agreement with them, and we're working with Codex trying to get a better definition for honey. And the other thing is we're working with Interpol, tracking.
Really?
Yeah, because honey fraud is number 3 on the list. It's for some reason it's milk. I mean, I can't. Milk is scary. If you're adulterating milk or not, it's not real milk. Milk, olive oil, I understand. Olive oil, I totally understand. And then honey's number 3 on the world market. It's the number 3 adulterated product on the market. Milk, olive oil, and then honey. So Interpol is interested, and they're looking at things like where are these shipments originating from, and could they be real, and things like that, because that's a good way to pick up. If all of a sudden you see these spikes in export where they haven't been there before, then there's something going on. They didn't improve their beekeeping that much in the last,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
They didn't have a major nectar flow. Yeah. So there's a wide range. I applaud any effort to better define honey. And it'd be nice if we had a really nice, tight international standard, but we don't. I mean, we have Codex has a definition, but it's not stringent enough.
Well, since the U.S. imports 80% of the honey we consume, we are the market of choice for everybody that produces honey anywhere. And one of the things that I've been become aware of is that one of the nice things about producing honey is if a country decides that they want to get into this export market, it's fairly easy to train people to keep bees in their country, and one of the big advantages is that you don't have to own land.
Yeah.
And so I can be a non-landowner and still produce an agriculture commodity, and the government's going to pay me for it, and life just got a lot better for a lot of people.
Hey, you had a long association. Maybe you're still associated with AI root, but you know where all the good clean wax is coming? It's all coming out of Africa.
Africa, right?
Because they practice a style of beekeeping where primitive, traditional, whatever you want to call it, they're in natural areas. They're harvesting the wax and the wax and honey at the same time, and they produce a lot of good quality wax. Again, I'll wear my Apimondia hat for a minute. We have a whole section that is using bees for development, and that is exactly what you just talked about. That bees can transform people's lives. I mean, you can not own land, have 20 hives, and buy your house in certain parts of the world. I mean, it's amazing what they can do. And so we're using that, and we're working closely with FAO, Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations in Rome, and trying to partner with them to increase the use of bees for development. Because you're right. There's a lot of untapped nectar out there that could be utilized and change people's lives.
An international standard, I think you hit it on the head. This honey's got to be the same everywhere.
Yeah.
Which would make things better, I think.
I think there's another way, because people they're going to keep trying to sell this artificially produced honey and this stuff with added things. I actually think there's a market for that. If people want something that's honey-like, just don't call it honey. In other words, it's call it honey syrup or something, but use some other designation. And I wonder if we could ever get to a day where there's some kind of better traceability. I mean, we always thought pollen would be it, but you can filter that out and you can add it back. But if there's some set of enzymes or something that we can look for, I know you can look for things that, if it's ever been heated to any degree, you can look for things that have changed in it. But a standard, and I don't know if we can figure a traceability to trace it back to Zimbabwe or trace it back to, Kansas, and
Well, last year we did have Eric Winger from True Source on the podcast, and he and his outfit are working on a method to true source it from audits and seals. It seems like that's one option that has some legs.
No, that would be an option. I guess what happens is as the volume goes up, as you get into these bigger and bigger volumes in these large packers, that's where the things start getting loose, and then you end up with honey on the shelf that you can't trust, and we have to find a way to correct that. I like, if you can convince most of the consumers to go look locally, they can find somebody that's labeling it locally, and hopefully they're honest. I mean, you have to. But and then make the Krogers and the Safeways and Targets of the world, do better about their buying. But yeah.
Well, it's when honey is a commodity, Honey Nut Cheerios and the like. That's it's tough to work with that large a volume with being used that way. So
yeah, I know.
I'm not sure. So this is going to be one of your goals as president of Apimondia to clean up the world's honey market?
Well, it's one of the things we've been actively working on, and we recognize it, and we're going to continue to work on it. The other is just better communication from Apimondia and being more inclusive as far as global beekeeping and trying to let us work together better. So yeah, no, I mean, I think honey fraud is one of the major issues facing the industry, and I think we need to work to try to correct it the best way we can.
Just a quick question on the beekeeper. So this is a beekeeper association.
Yep.
I think is what you said. So if an individual, me as a beekeeper, doesn't join Apimondia, I would encourage your association to join
your association,
Apimondia,
but you can actually join as an individual member too, and and you get. That way, you're at least part of the bigger group. You don't have much in the way of the only people who vote, and we vote on where to hold the next meeting and things like that, are the full members. And full members are like the American Beekeeping Federation, the larger organizations that represent the majority of beekeepers in an area. Sometimes it's a whole country. Sometimes it's just an area of a country.
All right. So interested parties, interested beekeepers are free to join and.
Yep. But the Kansas
attend conferences.
The Kansas beekeepers or even individual beekeepers can join the organization.
All right, good.
Yeah.
Well, you're going to put that when we wrap this up. That'll be on our webpage. Where to go to make that happen, right?
Yeah, I'll do a link to the Apimondia website and some of
good.
Yep.
All right.
Yep, we'll have that up on our show notes and additional information about Apimondia and maybe even some of your research. All they need to do is go out to Google Scholar, and they can find a lot of information and research you've done. That's been an honor to sit here and talk to you. Well,
I'm still doing a little bit. I kind of opened with this comment, but people say, "Oh, you retired." I'm like, I don't know. That's not the right word. I changed what I was doing, and I'm still doing research in a couple of different fronts. Actually, I didn't even talk about it. I got a small project in France. I'm working on I'm supposed to leave in 2 weeks to go back to France. I'm working on a project with Apis mellifera on the old German dark bee, or they call it just the dark bee, European bee. And there's a population that's existing there without treatment. The beekeepers don't treat, and they have a lot of wild. It's on an island. It happens to be on an island. So it's probably isolation that's helping them. But I've been following it for 1.5 years, and it's existing without mite treatment at all. So not that we can all do that, but it's interesting. So I've got several different research projects that I'm continuing, and that, and now this Apimondia hat, and then trying to keep my own bees from swarming. I'm busy enough. Yeah.
Well, really Jeff, this has been fun, and it was good to talk with you again. I definitely hope that you can come back after some time as being Apimondia president and give us a broader view, a time-lapse view of how things are going and where you want to go next. We'd love to have you come back.
I'd love to be back. Yeah. So,
all right.
Yep.
Good.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Jeff.
Hey, thank you, Jeff. Take care now.
Yep.
That was really good talking to Jeff. I learned in all of our podcasts, and I hope our listeners do too. I learned a lot, and what I found, I mean, he's doing a lot of great work. But what I found really interesting, what I really keyed in on, was the queen limit and the viability, and how important that is to the success of the queens that we receive in the mail. I mean, so there was some discussion on the Celsius temperature range. So I went ahead and using the power of the internet, I did the conversions. So he said the upper queen limit was 39 to 40 degrees Celsius, any greater than an hour. And if you convert that, the upper limit is 102.2 degrees to 104 degrees Fahrenheit.
102, yeah, that's pretty warm.
102. And then he said the lower limit was... I
think it was 8 to 10, wasn't it?
Yeah, 8 to 10, thank you. Yeah, 8 to 10 degrees Celsius, and that's 39 degrees to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's a very narrow range, and you can really see where there's a lot of room for exposure to those.
This shipment thing has been a bugaboo. 20 years ago, they were looking at it. They were putting thermometer, recording devices in boxes, shipping queens, and they were finding out that there was an issue. And the post office is down to the point where the only thing they will ship are bees and baby chicks. So I can see where it's hard to have environmental controls in that sort of environment. So I can see where that's going to cause some problems. One of the things that I wanted to talk about, or I wanted to mention with Jeff, and you remember our discussion with Jonathan Lundgren, where researchers became farmers. Here we have researchers becoming beekeepers. And Jeff is in the real world of pulling trailers and lifting hives and worrying about pollination fees and selling honey. And he's getting that perspective of what the real world of beekeeping is about and how to apply what he's doing to that part of the industry. I don't know a whole lot of people that are doing that, and I think it's going to be really good from his perspective and for our gain in what he's able to find out and apply to real research. The other thing I liked was his goal. His Apimondia, president of Apimondia. What do we know about Apimondia? Well, I hope now we know a lot more. I do. I go back a lot of years with Apimondia when I was chairman of the board of EAS, and they weren't warm and fuzzy. And I looked at Apimondia kind of 3 steps back most of my career in it, because they just haven't reached out a lot of friendly hands. It's really good that Jeff's part of this now to get the U.S. and Apimondia on a much better relationship. I really like his goals, better communication. Apimondia really has a lot of good information a lot of resources at their beck and call, and they can share it. And now with him, he's looking at digital communication and conferences on Zoom and whatever. Yeah, I see Apimondia really stepping up and joining the rest of the world, or the U.S. and the Apimondia getting together and doing a lot more together, which can only be good. They've got a lot of resources, and we've got a lot of resources. And then I'm really encouraged about his goals on chasing honey fraud. We did Eric with True Source. And that's a good step in the right direction with an international take on honey fraud and the things that they're looking at, and the projects that they've got planned, and what they're looking for and how to find it and how to end it can only be good for American beekeepers. So I'm really, really encouraged with Jeff taking over. I'm glad that the U.S., American honey producers, and Apimondia are shaking hands, and I look for this being really, really profitable for global beekeeping.
It sure sounds like it's a step in the right direction. I was surprised with him saying that some of these bad actors are hyper filtering the honey and then adding the sugar syrup or the syrup to it and then adding pollen back into it to, oh my God.
Yeah.
That sounds like, well, anyways, that's quite a challenge. It's quite a challenge.
The guy that we talked to on honey fraud earlier, he says there's no basement on price and there's no ceiling on the amount of fraud that people will commit. So Jeff just kind of pointed that out again.
Yeah.
75% of the honey we consume in this country is imported, so we're the market of choice. I was glad to hear him though talk about their Bees for Development program and getting people started. If they can get that regulated so that the honey they produce is the honey we get, that'll be a big improvement. It's win-win-win. The farmer wins, the country wins, the U.S. Consumer wins. I see it as being a good thing. I hope it pans out.
I do too. Well, they've got a good lead there at Apimondia with Jeff Pettis at the front. So, all right. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode of Beekeeping Today podcast. Before we go, I want to encourage our listeners to rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, wherever you download and stream the show. Your vote and review helps other beekeepers find us quicker. As always, we want to thank Bee Culture, the magazine for American beekeeping, for their sponsorship of this podcast. We want to thank our regular episode sponsor, Global Patties. Check them out at www.globalpatties.com. And finally, and mostly, we want to thank you, the Beekeeping Today podcast listener, for joining us on this show. Feel free to send us questions and comments at questions@beekeepingtodaypodcast.com. We'd love to hear from you. Anything else you want to mention, Kim?
Well, I think that does it, Jeff. I got to go check bees.
Yeah, get out there while the sun is shining. Take care.
All right, you too.